I just want to play this dream that was given to him last year. I want to see if y'all can, for my Hebrew Israelites, it's given to him last year. I want to see, can my Hebrew Israelites understand the meaning of this dream? I got it. Let's see if you can understand it. Let's give our praise and glory to the Most High Yah. In Joel, the Most High Yah says, I will pour out my spirit on everybody, all your, all the young men, old men, on your hand, the maids and the daughters, on the Slavs, and on your maid servants, on your Slavs. Remember who the Slavs are. So, see, can you understand what the Most High Yah showed him? I got it. I got it. I know what it means. Let's see, can you decipher what it means? Write down in the comments what you think it means. Let's hear his dream.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I want to appreciate my friend Cherie Goff being with me to help with the interpretations of these dreams. There's things I see and things that she sees, and I just appreciate the collaboration. As you see a lot more when you got some other eyes looking at it. It's like, many hands make short work. It kind of fits with this too. I want to tell you, this is one of my longest dreams. After I had it, I sat on it for about 3 weeks, praying through it, 2.5 weeks, praying through it, walking through it, trying to get my head wrapped around it, and then I sent it to Cherie. It's not only one of the longest dreams I've ever had. It went from September 4th to the 30th. But it was one of the loudest dreams I've ever had. The amount of background noise and stuff happening, if you see in the title, Carnival Barker's Dream, it was at like a carnival atmosphere. The noise level was loud. And so I'm just going to start reading it. And since it is long, we're going to try to get through it at the end and try to be done in about an hour. And we'll see what happens with that. But once again, September 4th to the 30th, 2024, it's called the Carnival Barker's Dream. I was standing on the outskirts of a small rural-type community, and there was a big wooden and hand-painted sign staked in the ground with just one stake that read, "Carnival coming this season." The words were hard to read because the top of each letter was written in bright yellow paint, and the bottom of the letter was written in orange paint.
They focus intensely. They thrive on routine.
It was written in orange paint. There were also fake flowers attached or like stapled to the top of the sign, and they were in that same bright yellow and the orange colors. I saw a long road into the community. It was lined with houses and farms and grain silos and businesses. No sidewalks on the sides of the road, and the ground was dry with no ditches either. So if you drove through southern Indiana, rural areas, that's what it looked like to me, okay? And there were people outside sitting all the way along on both sides of the road in those 70s style lawn chairs with the straps, like the straps that were wrapped underneath you would sit on, okay? And they were waiting on what seemed to me to be like a parade. The kids had buckets and things in their hands to catch candy, because I grew up in an area where when you did home parades and things, somebody's always throwing candy and they were putting the stuff in the buckets. The kids had buckets, and the adults were looking at their watches and adjusting their hats and sunglasses as the sun was beating down. It felt like a summer day, but it was hot. On the horizon of the road, way down the way, two men came walking along. One was as skinny as a rail, but sharply dressed, and the other one was very overweight and sloppy. I would use the word unkempt. The color of their suits, or their pants and things, was the same bright yellow I had seen on the sign. They had walking sticks in their right hands, and they had these real deep round orange stones in rings on both hands, as they had their suit jackets thrown over their left shoulders, and they were yellow, the bright yellow as well. The suits resembled the best of the season if you lived in the early 1900s. There was a lot of throwback to the past in the dream, and each one of these men had black arm garters on each arm right above their elbow, right about here on both arms. Okay, they had these arm garters. And these things appeared to be, they were very thick, but they were moving like they were alive. And they were moving while the men walked. You know, the one guy had, they both had their left arm with their jacket over their left shoulder, and you could see this thing just moving back here on their arm, like from here. But they were moving. And the people on both sides of the streets, they stood up as these guys got close enough, and like where the first people were. Most parades have like the fire engines, the fire trucks, and people stand up or whatever. When these guys got to the front of that line, these people started standing up, and as they walked into town, everybody else kept standing up beside them. Some in the crowd clapped, like they were glad to see the two men, but others were looking at them very suspiciously. As they walked by the crowds of people, they were taking single eyeglasses. And if you think back to the Germans during World War II, some of those guys had the one, they would take like one glass like this and look. It wasn't like a monocular. It wasn't like a thing that stretches out. It was just the one glass, and they would look through it. And so they were looking through these things to see how close they were to town and things like that, okay? The people who had previously seen the men at the beginning of the parade, they were now following them at about 15 feet back. And they would end up following these two men into the town itself and right up to the area of tents and carnival activities in the center of town. And as they got closer, new signs appeared in that same yellow and orange wording. It said this: loose wild animals. And the other sign said magic tricks and sleight of hand, up close and personal. And there were three tents with a big tent in the middle, okay? It was empty underneath, but both of the smaller tents on either side were full of people and all sorts of games. And there were many carnival barkers with the arm garters and the same color yellow pants as the two men who had walked into town were wearing. The rest of these men did not have jackets, but they were barking and hollering at people to come under the smaller booths. So and this is when the things started getting loud in my head. Hey you, hey this, hey that, you come here, try your luck, those sort of things. Okay? Now, some of them were very aggressive to the point of going out and pulling people by the arm and the sleeve up to their booths. Now, some of the crowds resisted, but some pulled out wallets, handed over money to play. But one of the key was they were only handing over $100 and $50 bills, okay? So these people wanted you to pay a big amount of money to play this game. And there was a big ring toss game in the middle of one of the smaller tents that everybody was crowded around. And the pegs seemed to be about 2 feet off the ground, but they were connected to miniature municipal structures which resembled a city landscape. So imagine a pole and a house next to it. Imagine a pole and a hospital, kind of, So you're going to be throwing rings over these things. Imagine a pole the size of that cane with that small miniature farm at its base. There was a bank, a hospital, a school. The word funeral parlor, there was a sign that said funeral parlor, which typically we don't use that term. I have a friend who works in the agency, and he said funeral parlor went out in like the early 1990s, and it was just funeral home, but funeral parlor was what it said on there. There was a grocery store, a retail store, a figure of a locomotive engine.
In Brawl Stars, you can be a katana-wielding...
a truck with a city insignia, and a church. There was also a water office, a gas station, a farm store with square hay bales piled out front, and there was a library. So each of these little miniature buildings were like near a pole in this big area with the ring toss, okay? I'm sorry, I lost my place. The Barkers were watching the two men who had walked into town and were getting signals from both men as to who to bark to step up. The two men were separated, but they were pointing at mostly men from behind them, like that one, get this guy over there, guy in the hat, that sort of thing, okay? The kids were mostly in the background, but they were straining to see what would happen. So people are watching the game. They're watching these people. They're watching these two guys, or they're watching the Barkers, not the two guys. And then he spoke up and he said, step right up, and try your hand to see if you can outwit the man in the middle. And as he said this, a big pole in the middle of the ring toss was uncovered. And on it was a very human-looking scarecrow that was moving and appeared to be talking. So it was like almost like an AI robot. It was obvious this is not human, but it sure did look human. But it was not talking like normal humans speak. It was choppy and just it was creepy. Not like in a Halloween way, but just creepy, like there's something not right about that. There were people moving around the 8 to 10 Barkers in the game area and giving their money, which was slipped into a glass jar secured at each corner of the game area. So imagine these large glass jars at all four corners of the game area. The Barkers would take the money, and then they would pull their arm garter right off of their arm and hand it to people. So their right hand would reach over, grab the arm garter on their left arm, pull it off, and it would snap back together and harden. And then they would hand this ring to the people to throw those things out. So it was like a gel-formed ring, but once broken from the arm, it would reattach, harden up as it was handed to them, and it became a ring. It became a ring big enough to throw around the poles. Okay. Now there were no prizes hanging from the ceiling like you mostly see in carnivals, but there was a sign in the middle near the man that was the scarecrow, and it said, "Ring 5 and thrive. Ring but 4, attempt no more. Ring 3 and others will see." And the biggest man of the two, the one that was very much overweight and unkempt, he called for everybody to listen to him. He said that anyone ringing at least 5 of the goals in a row would win all the money collected in the jars. And now everybody was approaching the Barkers, handing over money, hand over fist, so to speak, just getting rings and throwing rings, and everyone was watching with intent eyes. So you had people, there's noise and noise and noise, people watching, and you got this scarecrow in the middle that's kind of watching everything too. So a few people would get one ring over a pole, and the crowd would hush and get real quiet. Like they're watching and listening, like E.F. Hutton had said something. And then they would watch as they threw the next ring, and if they missed, the faces were like, "Oh man, can you believe that?" It was just frustration. But their hands would go back to their wallets and hand over remaining cash to try again. And then people were getting mad and screaming at the Barkers who just patiently listened. Like they were yelling and screaming, they just listened and didn't make any facial expressions. Basically, hey, you're here to play the game or what? That kind of attitude. But they just kept handing over the rings and taking the money. And once the rings went over a pole, so imagine you got a pole like this in a small, like a house. The ring would go over, and then the ring would just crush. It was like this thing was alive, and it would just squeeze and crush everything. It would destroy the school, the house, the library, whatever it was at the bottom. It would just get destroyed because this thing would just jump in. And even more than that, the scarecrow in the middle would start getting taller every time something like that happened. Okay, it would become more animated, and it would become more belligerent and more rude, and a light would go out at the top of that pole, basically that put that piece out of place. So now no one else can throw a ring over this one. So there's less and less rings now. The lights are off. The pole, there's darkness above the area where you could see the things illuminated. The light would go out. Top of the pole was rung when it was rung, and then that piece was out of play. People began to complain there's no way that they could win if they had to get 3 in a row because more and more of the pieces kept becoming unplayable. None of the Barkers seemed to be bothered by this at all. Big guy stood up and he said, "Hey, we just enforced the rules and did not create them." Then he laughed so hard he fell on the floor and he rolled in the dirt. So you got this big guy rolling back and forth in yellow pants, this yellow jacket, silver shirt, just yelling. He's just laughing and laughing and laughing. It looks literally like a pig in the mud. People started leaving, and the ones who had tossed the rings had a dirty ring around their wrists and even around their necks. And people were pointing it out to them. And some were trying to wipe it away But if they touched the dirt part, it was like it spread to them. And many of you probably got a spit bath from your mom before you went in somewhere, and you're like, no, get away, get away. Every time these people were trying to get the dirt off the necks and the wrists, it would jump onto them, almost like it was alive. It'd come from the rings. So it was like dirt jumping onto them. The people were grumbling and complaining and leaving, while the barkers at the game were emptying those glass jars into a barrel at the foot of the scarecrow in the middle. And as the people left down the same road they'd walked in on, I saw the man I see in the dreams. He walked right by me, face straight ahead. He was not recognized or noticed by anybody else because everybody, we got to get this dirt off you. We're going to go home. How much money did you lose? All that noise, all those comments you would hear after a carnival or something like that. Because all these people were caught up in frustrations and angst. And the man that I saw, he was just wearing the dress of most of the crowd. He had on jeans, t-shirt, just normal. He walked through the gate into the game area, and I told Sheree I didn't put this in the dream, but he just kind of put his hand on the side and hopped over. Nothing was going to stop him from getting inside. So he hops over there, and he pokes that now very tall scarecrow in the middle. He just poked it in the middle, turned around, and this thing begins to deflate. And he's looking at me, he's looking around at watching situations, but he waits until the whole thing is down below him, finally hits the ground, and he starts to speak. And he says this: empty promises never change, especially if they come from the man in the middle. Your loss, their gain. They're being squeezed as well, but they prefer you don't know that. Those pursuing anything other than my will always be angry at the world and blame me for their unprayed about choices. Life will wring you and squeeze you and hold you. It will mold you into its own image and accept your soul as currency when you're through in this world. My church, you need to decide whether I'm the most important thing in your world, or you will lose me in your pursuits of everything else. It's about your willingness to surrender to my will alone and nothing else, because nothing will satisfy me. The man in the middle is just a shallow and hollow example of who you are, built up on the traditions and ideals that don't fulfill you spiritually. Sacrifices made to move you forward in your career or what your idea of success looks like, and it's not even close. Close doesn't count. And even though you know it, you remain unmoved and unfazed. But I'm not. My standard has never changed, and it won't. Don't be found wanting, because now is when you cannot be found wanting.
Int helped me and my wife get a home loan.
At this moment, he bends down, he picks up a rock, just a big rock, almost like a geode. If you're from the Midwest, you probably know what a geode is. Just a rock about the size of about a softball. He's starting to get ready to walk off. He just looks up, he grabs this rock, and he throws the rock way, way up in the air and starts walking. He never turns around. He never looks back. His face is like flint. He's going down the same road he walked in on, the same road those two other guys came in on. He never turns around, and I'm seeing the rock get bigger and bigger, and finally it comes down, and it crashes all 3 tents. And that was the end of the dream that I had. So Sheree's going to share some ideas, some things that she has seen in this, and I'll share some things along the way as well. I'm going to let her primarily take it and run with it, but appreciate you listening, and